This is Dr. Heiss, and I'm here today to talk to you about the COVID virus. There's been a lot of misconceptions and things that need to be clarified, and hopefully I can explain it to you in terms that make sense, and hopefully you can go out of here with a little more understanding of what we're dealing with. If we look at the COVID virus, it's like any other virus. It's got a certain shape, and somehow we have to go ahead and find something that can attach onto that shape so that we can go ahead and attack it with our immune system. There's two different types of vaccines that we do. If we have like a live attenuated one, I'm going to give you an example. If my arm from here down to here is the virus, then what I need to do is I need to take one that changes the shape a little bit, but the area where I'm going to build a receptor, this area right here is not going to change, but now this is different. If I give you this, it could mutate and it could actually go back into this and become the actual virus itself, i.e. I could catch the disease and it would act the same way. We have certain viruses that we develop vaccines for that work that way, but this is not one of them. What we did was we found what's called a receptor. Let's say it's this area right here, and we're making something that's going to stick into it. So when I want to develop a vaccine, I just need to go from here up, and I need to make a lot of these things. And if I do, and that's what my vaccine is full of, I'm going to have a pretty healthy response because all it's going to recognize is this cup shape. Now, in doing that, one of the things that's happened is we have found that people who naturally get COVID, at about 3 to 4 months, a lot of times the antibodies that their body has are gone. That's because they're short-term memory antibodies, which are called IgM antibodies. Now, we have some diseases where we have lifelong immunity, and a lot of times that requires more than one shot. And if you know with the current one, some of them are giving us one shot at 3 weeks later, and some are doing it at 4 weeks later, and some say they don't need another shot. The goal is to try and invoke that IgG response because the IgG antibodies will last a lifetime. So we don't exactly know how long that's going to take, but that's part of what's going on here. Now, when we get the vaccine, some people say, well, I had a reaction to it. You know, my arm was sore. Well, having a sore arm is no different than getting any other shot that you have in your arm. It's typically going to be sore. Now, some people on the next day may feel a little achy or a little tired, but that usually resolves fairly fast. I can tell you from personal experience, after my first shot, I had no reaction whatsoever. After the second one for 24 hours, I felt a little lethargic, a little tired, kind of like I was dragging through the day. Went to bed that night, and by the next day when I woke up, I felt perfectly fine. One of the things that we know is that when your body is developing its response, the response I had actually says that I have antibodies, and they were recognizing that second vaccine. And because of that, my body was reacting to it a little bit. I wasn't catching the disease, it just means my immune system was working on it. Now, for some people who don't have a reaction, it may be because their body hasn't quite made enough antibodies at this point in time, so they didn't have a big response to it and didn't have that achiness or feelings. So, as far as the development of the vaccine, people say, my gosh, it was done in 9 months. How can you do that and have it be effective? One of the things to remember is that up until this vaccine, all vaccines up to now have been developed by the government. The federal government works a little differently than most companies and private enterprises. Typically, they work 9 to 5. A lot of the people don't work very hard at it. They get 30 holidays a year, and they get weekends off. They don't have any real big rush or impetus to go ahead and develop a vaccine because there's no money involved in it for them. They work for the government. When you involve private enterprise, let's face it, they were probably running 24/7 until this thing was finally developed. Why? Because there's billions of dollars in revenue for the vaccine and who can make it first and have one that's the most effective. So there was a lot of dollars at stake here for this, and the federal government fronted the money to a lot of the companies. $1.6 billion went to Pfizer. I think Moderna got $1.4 billion. So there was a lot of money being doled out in order to get this thing moved along as fast as possible. What you have to remember, though, is like any vaccine, when you're developing it, you can't take any shortcuts. There are a set of policies. These aren't political policies. These are scientific policies. If you notice a lot of the studies, 30,000 people, that's not some random number. That's what's being required for these studies. As far as the testing, the side effect profiles, all the things that they have to track and keep monitoring. And in fact, if they did have negative outcomes, it may have stopped the trials. It hasn't stopped any of them yet. Some had to stop because there was a death, but was that death attributable to something else or to the COVID virus? Obviously it wasn't, because it obviously went on. As far as going beyond that, you can go ahead and look at the FDA approval process. That normally takes 4 months. Now, if they develop the vaccine, which the fastest virus vaccine ever developed prior by the government took 4 years and 10 months. This took 9 months. Now, the FDA approval is normally at least a 4 or 5 months process. The FDA did it in 3 weeks. They virtually had to take all the data that had been collected on every individual and go over all the data and all the results on every individual person who was in that study. The process doesn't change. It can be compressed, it can be accelerated, but it can't be changed and steps can't be eliminated. So given that, is it a perfect virus? We don't know that yet. Does it appear to have good results? It does appear to have good results. It certainly did in the studies. Pfizer came back at 95% efficacious. Moderna came back at 94% efficacy. So we've got some very high numbers here as far as how well it's working. And I think I mentioned it before, but if not, they're finding that the vaccines are creating 10 times the immune response that having it naturally promotes. So given that, getting the vaccine, you have a much better chance of not getting it again. And I can tell you now, in our current world, some people who have had it naturally at 4 months out, well, for them, they went ahead and some have gotten it again, and they're having a second go around. So when people say, I had COVID, do I need to get the vaccine? I would certainly recommend it. And in fact, I was positive and I still got the vaccine. Again, I'm now past both of my doses. I'm feeling great right now. If you have any questions, I work at Westminster St. Augustine. Employees, if you want to go ahead and we can create some kind of system of getting your questions together, and maybe I can do some kind of answer format. I will leave that up to the staff here to go ahead and arrange that with me, and I'd be happy to go ahead and either verbally or written or just call you up and give you a quick response. But I will go ahead and address your questions because I want you to be comfortable, and if you haven't gotten the vaccine, I'd certainly like to encourage you to go ahead and get it. I see very little downside to it and a lot of upside. So thank you for your time.